early escape from this talk. That's cool. Well, anyway, for you guys watching on Zoom, so nice to ride the airwaves with you. We're on swivel, which means this device, if you hop an iPad to, it follows me around the room and it picks up the mic right there. How cool is that? Kind of like the vision right there. Get two shots, almost like a TV station. You switch from shot to shot. I can look in this camera and then right over to that. Well, Brad, whenever you're ready. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much for joining us today for the first in our Fall 2021 Sustainability Research and Practice Seminar. My name is Bradley Flam. I'm the director of Westchester University's Office of Sustainability, and we have a really exciting program of presentations this semester. And we're thrilled that you've joined us, whether in person in this room or via Zoom, or via the recording that we are doing today that will be available on Westchester University, the Francis Harvey Green Library's Digital Commons website. So I will not take up any more time than to say in advance thank you to Professor Drew Anderson for joining us today, and I will hand over the stage.
Appreciate that so much. And next week, it's this in-person, a little hike through the Gordon Natural area down by the stadium. So next week, you want to meet at the stadium if you want to do the seminar next week. All right, so for this week, let's talk about some communication techniques when it comes to sustainability. And this is interesting. I have to figure out which cameras to look. I'll try to work the room on the in-person rooms and all the cameras. So one of the reasons I'm here is let's look at some different ways that we communicate different things in sustainability. So from climate change, also to just regular everyday sort of things. So I got a picture right up there of me down in Costa Rica just last week. And it was actually really cool. Look how blue that water is right back there. Let me clean up my screen a little bit to kind of get some of that stuff out of the way. And here's the biggest tip I can say for any presentation. You got to jump right into it, just like the frog, get right into it. One of the biggest issues that I see when people do presentations is they kind of give sort of a lot of thank yous or long introductions. And I always like to say the faster you can jump into something, the better. Hit the people that are listening and watching with some interesting story or something to kind of grab their attention. Because take a look at this. I stole this from CBS 21, which is the CBS station in Harrisburg. And it's talking about digital content for YouTube. And it's saying, hey, 16-second little videos to 2-minute videos is what does the best, which just means you don't have a whole lot of time to catch someone's attention. So don't waste those couple minutes right at the start of your presentation, kind of talking about what you're going to talk about. Just jump right into it. And when you do that, lead with something interesting. Start out with something that's going to catch people's attention. And that's one of the things I like to do when I do the weather. So besides teaching sustainability courses here and earth and space science classes, I also do the weather on TV. There's me in action, this particular station. I was filling in the State College area. And just for a second, what I'm going to do is I'm going to play the video, but I'm going to mute because I think it's weird to toss it to myself. And what I want to show you is how I started this regular weather forecast. And today's an interesting weather day here. So we have some storms on the way, even though the weather is nice. And this day, the main story was there was some rain. So as we play this out, I'm right there. And I was talking about how I went to State College. And when I was there, the sun came out for a couple minutes. And it had been raining all day. It looked cloudy all day. But look, I saw a little break of sun. And here's what I started out weather with. Where's the rainbow? Right? It was raining. You could tell that the sun's breaking out. I should see a rainbow. I took it as an opportunity to explain that you're not going to see a rainbow in the middle of the day. The problem was I was there at noon. You can only see a rainbow a couple hours after sunrise or a couple hours before sunset. So I brought that up real quick and I said, hey, you know what? We still got some more rain to come. And I got right into my main job while I'm there to give people the forecast to say, here's what's coming and when you can expect the rain to end. But that was kind of my little catch, my little hook to loop people in to really grab attention and then get right to the message of why I'm there. So important any presentation you do to take advantage of those first couple seconds and try to do something engaging right off the top. And I try to do that all the time when I do weather. Some days there's not a whole lot going on. You got to get a little creative. Maybe you can get a little interesting stat if you're on the weather side. And just kind of piggyback in off of that for just a moment, I want to talk about the very unpublicized sequel to Al Gore's documentary, An Inconvenient Truth. This came out in 2017, and not a whole lot of people saw this. So this sequel, I thought it was a pretty good movie, and I have my students watch it because there's a lot of great information. It's well shot. They did something that was not that great right off the top. So I want to show you a clip from the movie, which, by the way, anyone, let me mute this for just, you know what? I'm playing as if I've never used technology before. Try to think while I have some feedback. Let me just mute that for just a second. Anyway, so what's interesting about this, and you can get access to this film through Westchester University in our library databases, and that's where this film is. Oh, I see the issue. That's where this film is stored. Well, let me just hop this presentation right back up to the front of the screen. Looks like I'll do a little restart and pop that in. So if you're joining online, here's what happened. The screen in the front of the room, it said, you know what? I kind of want to take the afternoon off just because it's so nice outside. A little warm today for my liking, but no big deal. We'll bring that screen back in from lunch and hop right in. In the meantime, though, what I want to talk about is I'm going to show you this little clip from the movie An Inconvenient Sequel. And while it's a great movie, and they start out with some beautiful cinematography showing glaciers, just absolutely incredible shots, they drop the ball a little bit because they're not speaking to the video. They're showing all these beautiful glaciers, and to a novice like me, an outsider looking in, and I see that sort of thing, I'm like, oh, this is just nice shots. I'm used to National Geographic sort of stuff where you just kind of look at what they're showing on the screen and go, oh, that's pretty, and not really expect anything from it. Well, in the movie itself, what's happening is they are talking about some issues that Al Gore ran into. So they're playing audio clips of different politicians making fun of Al Gore. And this is playing to the backdrop of some beautiful scenery. So here's the movie right here. Let's see if we can get the audio rolling. And I'll play just for like a minute or so of this clip. There we go.
Sea levels may rise 20 feet is absurd. Even the IPCC.
Al Gore, he always goes down the road of hyperbole. Not only is he losing the argument on climate change, but he's losing the science as well.
And you don't go see Joseph Goebbels' films to see the truth about Nazi Germany. You don't want to go see Al Gore's film to see the truth about global warming.
And it's the most severe winter storm in years, which would seem to contradict Al Gore's hysterical global warming theories. Now,
so you get the impression right there.
Al Gore and is calling for the Nobel Peace Prize Committee
to make that disappear. I was trying to pause it, but with those little blips right there, took a second or two. But you got the picture right there if you could hear it. It was talking about all these different politicians, but you're looking at this beautiful scenery. So there was a disconnect for the audience. When I went and saw the movie in the theater, I'm watching it and I'm a little confused what's going on. And because of that, it took me about 15 minutes to get into the movie. If they just would have said, just set it up a little bit, said, hey, look at this beautiful scenery, but look how it's melting. And it continues to melt. The Arctic, the Antarctic is warming faster than anywhere else on the planet by 2 or 3-fold, depending upon where you are. And look at the effects. And yet folks are trying to say this isn't happening. And that would have been a great way to get you started and you get the good cinematography, but they dropped a little bit. They kind of missed their opportunity. Not to throw shade on the director, because that was an editorial decision, but from this outsider looking in when I watched it, I didn't feel it was quite effective. Now, I want to look at the flip side of that, which I thought was very effective, was actually the preview for the movie. So this is going back to, I think, just after the election, and we'll take it back to 2017, and look how they start this preview to capture your attention.
It's supposed to be 70 degrees.
And let me just unmute this for everyone here that's in the room for just a second.
Today it's freezing here. Speaking of global warming, we need some global warming. It's freezing.
That's engaging. That makes me, just give me a second to mute the audio. You know, that really kind of draws you in a little bit. You hear that and say, hey, it's really cold. Where is global warming? And you know what, we hear that again and again from different folks like Donald Trump. He brought that up a lot on Twitter. I teach some of this course material, and so I always like grabbing print screens. And when Donald Trump would talk about when there was one instance of weather where it was like crazy cold. And I think it's just, yeah, I remember 2017, I had to go out and cover a story on New Year's Eve. It was the coldest New Year's Eve on record in Harrisburg. I can tell you that for a fact because I was there and I looked at the record books afterward. My fingers got so cold when I was trying to record. I went to, I want to say, the Mechanicsburg wrench drop. So around Central PA, they drop all sorts of different things on New Year's. You got the Dillsburg pickle in Dillsburg, PA, wrench drop in Mechanicsburg. Anyway, super crazy cold. And a lot of times Donald Trump will bring that up and say, hey, where's this global warming? Where's all that we hear about if it's this cold? And while it's bad science, I will say this, you know what? Maybe a lot of people snoozed when they were in science class. There's Mama Anderson right there. She got tuckered out after a family trip. And I can tell you, you know, she wouldn't know that one instance of weather doesn't relate to our climate. So when we say climate change and things like that, we're looking at the long-term trends of weather. What's weather doing overall? Hey, listen, you can get one really cold stretch of weather, but that doesn't mean anything in the grand scheme of things if it's not happening frequently. Something else that's really interesting, actually, you might have heard some buzzwords about polar vortex. Believe it or not, global warming can lead to these crazy cold outbreaks in the United States. Kind of counterintuitive, which just makes science complex and makes it harder for a lot of everyday people like Mama Anderson right there snoozing away. I'm imagining when she was in science class. You know, it makes things difficult to understand when the science isn't clear. So here's what's going on. There's a couple different jet streams, and the jet streams not only control our weather, that's part of the reason we're getting some storms later today, where the jet stream's pushing those storms toward us. But the jet stream separates really cold air to the north and really warm air to the south. And there's several of them. Occasionally, the one that's usually locked up around the Arctic, that's usually like a circle, literally circling the Arctic Circle, it can get a little wavy. And if it gets wavy, down comes some cold. And it can actually get wavy because of some trends of warming. And some of the warming could actually lead to these little dips in the jet stream to cause the cold. And just because that's counterintuitive, how about another one that we see so much? This one talking about, we're looking at dry weather and wildfires out west. We've been hearing a lot. Gosh, we just had that big flood here in PA, but that's just one instance of weather. We're starting to get floods all the time. That would be a difference in our climate. But here's what's really interesting when it comes to global warming. So as the air warms, it gets more humid. And the more humid the air is, there's a little humid outside today, the more you can squeeze out of that air when we get some rain. So we get some storms later today, they got plenty of water to pull out of the air to get storms. All right, so the warmer it is, the more humid it is, which means the more rain you can get from storms or hurricanes as well. We got our flooding from hurricane remnants. And that's typical around here for us to have flooding. It's either going to come from storms that just pop up in the same spot again and again and again, or keep going over the same spot, or most times it's the leftovers of a tropical storm or a hurricane. So that's one part of it. So global warming causes more flooding. The flip side of it is global warming is also drying out the ground more, leading to more droughts as the temperature goes up. The drier the ground is, the less snow you're getting on the top of mountains out west to kind of come down those mountains as the summer goes on. The drier it is, and that can lead to more wildfires. So global warming can cause both flooding and droughts at the same time. Complex. Kind of hard to break that down and not easy to communicate that in one single tweet. So I think one of the most important things is when you're communicating some science, particularly some science you really want that audience to get and grab, you just got to know your audience. Where is their head at? I know Mama Anderson knows nothing about science. So I need to make whatever content I want to share accessible to her who doesn't understand any of the stuff that we just talked about, yet in a way that she can grab that. And there's some strategies for that. So I think this is kind of interesting. We'll watch. I feel bad for this poor guy. We'll watch a quick little clip of this congressperson who's down in Texas, and he confused the science, and it's no fault to him. It's just science is confusing, and we hear so many different sources. So let me share what he had to say, and I'll tell you what the real science is. But he didn't know any better, so you can't fault the guy.
Forest Service and the BLM, you want very much to work on the issue of climate change. I was informed by the past director of NASA that they have found that the moon's orbit is changing slightly, and so is the Earth's orbit around the sun.
Okay, that's true. So Earth's orbit changes a little bit. Moon, okay, no big deal. That's everything. Science is good so far. Let's see where he goes with this. A little tough to hear, but I'll repeat what he's saying.
We know there's been significant solar flare activity. And so is there anything that the National...
So we talked about solar flares. That's something NASA's very concerned about. Has nothing to do with climate per se. There's theories from some folks that it does, but in short, solar flares is just energy from the sun. From times, the sun will have bigger bursts of energy that come out, and that can mess things up here on Earth if we get too much of that energy. It can cause us some power grid issues. Thankfully, we're not in a cycle or kind of a phase where the sun is sending these big bursts. But what's interesting is back in the 1800s, I want to say 1865, the telegraph system, the text of the 1800s, that system went down, and the theory is that this bigger burst of energy from the sun is what led to disruptions in that power grid that moved that communication lines. And so this stuff can happen. And these solar flares, that's one thing they monitor. It could also lead to satellites going out of service sooner. It can mess up communications if you're using a satellite. So in other words, not that we use satellite phones, but pilots are going to use a satellite to talk to folks, so things like that. That's what solar flares are going to affect. They don't really have anything to do with climate. It's not the way that energy works. So, okay, he mentioned a couple things. Now let's see what he has to say. So now is this question.
Forest Service or BLM can do to change the course of the moon's orbit or the Earth's orbit around the sun? Obviously, that would have profound effects on our climate. Okay,
So he thought that if we change the orbit around the sun and the moon's orbit, that'll affect our climate. The truth is, it'll have absolutely nothing to do with that, because the way our climate works, it's actually really simple. It has to do with the tilt of the earth. That's it. What's interesting is in the winter, we're actually closer. Here's the sun. The Earth's closer to the sun in the winter than in the summer. Let's think about that. So summertime right now, the Earth's farther away. Doesn't make any sense. It should be colder, right? Has nothing to do with that. It's all about the tilt of the Earth, and that just dictates how much sunlight you're getting kind of beat down on the ground, and that warms up the ground, that warms up the air above it. So it's all about that tilt of the Earth. The actual orbit, little change, and that's not going to really matter so much. Now, a change in the tilt of the Earth, oh my, well, we see some differences in the climate. If the Earth got really no tilt, it'd be like California weather all the time. Everything would be kind of the same all year round. Tilt it way more, our summers and winters would be way more extreme. So no fault to this guy in Texas, nice little Texas flag ornament right there. But it's just, it goes back to that, the science literacy isn't there. So, it's helpful when you're communicating science to just understand your audience. And that is one of the things that I would say that Donald Trump does very well, and not to get political here in any way. So I want to make sure we look at both sides. So I grabbed this picture off Facebook. I grabbed this picture off the internet from that news source service. Donald Trump, if you ever watch any of his speeches, he's a great speaker. He's very, take away what he's saying. We're just analyzing both of these folks for how they communicate. Great speaker, super engaging, easy to digest what he's sharing. Not a lot of big words. The messages are clear, and he's got a lot of energy. And that energy and that engagement helps the message to be received by the audience. Joe Biden's strength is that, it's just that word right there. It's kind of hidden away on the screen a little bit, authenticity. One of the things when you watch him do a speech, you really feel his authenticity and how he really cares about what he's talking about. He might have some family relation to what he's discussing, or just the way he phrases it, you really feel that he's authentic for what he's communicating, which helps his message to be received. So that's the strength of Joe. He's very authentic when he shares messages in a big speech. Donald's really engaging in a big speech. And here's something that's so important. When you have a certain strength, try to amplify that, try to use that more. It's clear Joe's gotten coaching I'm sure they're telling him to be more kind of, to show that authenticity, show kind of more of that care for what he's talking about. And I'm sure Donald got the same sort of coaching. These guys get, there's a lot of big bucks spent on telling them how to communicate. So for you, if you're giving a presentation or anything like that, think about what your strengths are in a presentation, and each one of us has something that's different, and try to focus on that so that you can use it more, and it helps your message to get received. So something to think about, because that goes right back to knowing your audience. That helps you get that message received. Another thing that helps you to get the message received would be some analogies. I got to tell you, I do this stuff all the time. This right here caught my eyes just the other day. Look at the headline. It says, like putting steroids into a storm. That made it really clear to me. Steroids, usually getting big muscles, it's going to make something bigger. So right there, just reading it, knowing nothing about science, that told me that's going to get a storm really big. And then they link that back to how climate change affects hurricanes, which is absolutely accurate. We talked about this earlier. The warmer the air gets, the more humid it gets, the more rain you can get, which means when you do get hurricanes, because the earth has warmed, and it's warmed very rapidly since the 1980s, is which concerns scientists the most, that means we can get more rain when we do get these high impact events like hurricanes. Additionally, the fuel for a hurricane and a tropical storm, it's so simple. It likes warm ocean water. It likes the bath water. I don't like that. I like cold ocean water. I'll go up to Maine or Jersey coast, unless it's too cold in summer. I like the cold water. If you like the warm water, head down to Florida. These guys like Florida for a reason. You hear about them down in Texas and Florida. They like the warm water. They like the bad water temperature. You need 80 degrees to grow one of those. The warmer the water gets, the bigger those can get, because that is the fuel for hurricanes and tropical storm, warm ocean water. So warm it up, they get bigger. As the earth warms, the ocean's going to warm as well. So that can lead to bigger hurricanes and storms. And then additionally, since there's more water in the air, we can get more rain out of them. So great way to communicate that, just by saying, like putting steroids in a storm. So that way it tells you right there, you can make storms bigger, just the way climate change affects hurricanes. Analogies, in my mind, in science, are one of the most powerful tools that you have to communicate something that's complex to someone like, we'll go back here. I got to show Mama Anderson again, who was sleeping in science class, because that picture just cracks me up so much. She doesn't try to travel around too much. So she was, by the end of the trip, doing a lot of walking tours and things. She was very tired. So analogies would help her dissect some of that information. And I'm a sucker for that with some props. At the TV station I work at, which is WFMZ up in Allentown, I was talking about a volcano that was recently close to erupting in the Philippines. And I wanted to explain, because they gave me time to be a science anchor in the morning, a couple days of the week. I wanted to explain that the clouds we see, the ash that comes out of a volcano, it's not the ash. If you've ever had a fire pit and you had to clean it out, or maybe you've had a campfire and you've had to clean out your ashes or something, make sure everything the fire was put out. Those ashes from a campfire, fire pit, really light, feathery, airy. That is not how volcanic ash works. Volcanic ash is sand, but with bigger rock pieces in it. So anytime there's volcanic ash, and movies always get this wrong. Watch any volcano movie, they're gonna have it wrong. They're gonna show light, feathery sort of ash. But volcanic ash in that cloud right there, you'd feel sand. If that cloud hits you, you'd feel some sand in that. And depending upon what it's doing with eruption, you might get hit with some bigger rocks, because what happens is lava when it's upstairs, so it's magma when it's down below the ground, lava when it comes up the ground. When some of that kind of goes off in the air, it's going to instantly cool and literally turn rock solid. That's how you make new rock, just make that lava cool all the way. So I was talking about that and just explaining that volcanic ash is like sand. Now, there's a little bit more to it, but for the audience I was sharing with it, we love that. I've gotten emails. They love when I pull props out of my pocket. I did a story on the Appalachian Mountains, talking about why the Appalachian Mountains are there, and I brought 2 sponges from my sink, had them like hidden in my pocket, and I talked about the whole reason we have the Appalachians is because present-day Africa slammed into present-day us, North America. When that happened, those continents both have the same weight, so 2 things with the same weight hit each other. What's going to happen is the ground's going to buckle, and you can see that really well if you get your disc sponge and put them together. They buckle, and that's the whole reason we have the Appalachian Mountains. And so it's a great little quick analogy. Now, again, I'm a sucker for props, so that's one of my strengths. That's why I like to do that a lot, and I know people like it, so I try to amplify that, as we talked about a little earlier. There's other ways to simplify things, because maybe you're not cheesy like me and not into props. A great climate scientist out of Penn State, really nice guy too, his name's Michael Mann. He likes to use cartoons, and he kind of put that in the book because that's his way, his hook to get his message to be better received by folks like Mama Anderson who snoozed in science class. And you know what? The cartoons are really effective. Now, they're not funny cartoons. They're kind of, a little bit of a humor, but it's really more than anything, it's communicating a point. And when Michael does speeches, and there's plenty of speeches as lectures online, where he's basically going through a slideshow of just cartoons. Think about that. A climate scientist guy, guy's going to give you all the science. He shows up and he's just giving you a slideshow of cartoons. Not kind of what you're thinking. That's going to catch your attention. More importantly, it's going to make the material, what he's presenting, more relatable. And that's one of the biggest issues that folks have kind of understanding climate change is it's not quite relatable. Yeah, I know it's hot today, but if something's not happening in my backyard, may as well not be happening. Now, if you live in Alaska or somewhere like that, and you see power lines and poles going like that because the ground's starting to melt that would never melt before, and you see the way it damages infrastructure, you're going to be really concerned. But if you're not seeing something outside your window, no big deal. I can tell you in the last decade, our average temperature each day has gone up about 1 to 2 degrees. The decade before that, it was about the same. So in the last 20 years, on average, the air outside on a normal day, it's gone up about somewhere between 2, 3, 4, 5 degrees. Not something we really noticed. There's always a joke. He actually had a great cartoon. I should have grabbed that one, of 2 frogs on top of a stove in a clear glass, because there's an old chemistry sort of, I guess, trick that they did where they put frogs literally in a clear container and put them on the stove and started boiling a live frog. And guess what happens? As long as you leave the lid off, the frog's going to jump out when it gets too hot. I think that's what happens. At least I hope. We don't need frog legs boiled, I guess. So what's interesting is, you're not going to notice a gradual change, but you're certainly going to notice when it gets too hot all of a sudden. And that was a great way to communicate it. Let's see what he's talking about here. He says, we can get more sand from the drought regions. I like that, going back to more flooding and more droughts. I see what he's talking about. Something else that's so important when you communicate science to an audience is, if you can, get rid of technical terms. In fact, I got to tell you something, I unweathered the weather. Now, part of that had to do with the boss coming in one day, brought everyone in the weather team together and basically said, yeah, we want you to unweather the weather. You're not allowed to have a map wider than Pennsylvania. Weather stuff, cold fronts, highs, lows, get rid of them. We can't use that sort of stuff anymore. Do more lifestyles. Give us more forecasts about what are the next couple of days. Can you wash your car or not? What's a good day to water your plants? That's the kind of stuff they wanted. Well, they took that a little bit to the extreme, but I like what he was trying to say. What he was trying to say was weather presentations are a little bit too technical. I don't know if it's really serving the audience to do something like this. Here's what we'll do. I grabbed the weather map from 2 a.m. this morning because, like a true college student, guess who was working on the presentation late at night because he left at the last minute? That would be this guy. So I grabbed the weather map at 2 this morning, and this is showing some nasty storms that just exited Michigan, caused some tornado warnings and things like that. That's heading our way, so we're going to get some storms later. But what I want to do is I want to give you the weather forecast 2 different ways. I'm going to tell you the exact same information, but I'm going to present it 2 different ways. I'm going to present it first with some technical meteorology in there, and then I would present it how I present it on TV. You tell me which lands a little bit easier with you to digest that material and understand what I'm actually saying. So here's what we're tracking. We've got this big area of low pressure that's centered just over Canada. That area of low pressure bringing a cold front with it, that cold front, sparking the air in front of it to rise, causing all this convection right here, leading to some strong storms, some with some heavy rain and gusty winds. That is heading our way. When that cold front gets here later today, that's going to spark out storms in our area, causing some really severe storms in a few spots. Okay, so I dropped some technical stuff. Here's how I would say it if I was doing the weather today. I would say, I would ignore all this stuff right here, all this weather dressing right there, that'd be gone. And I would just say, hey, anytime we see a line of storms like that, look how there's a line of rain and some yellows right there and oranges, which just means they're stronger. So there's some storms. Anytime you see a line like that, that just means the storms are strong. And it usually means they have gusty winds. So I wouldn't say usually, I would be confident on there. So I would say, those storms that would have strong gusty winds, that's what's heading our way. When that line of rain and storms gets here, they're going to be strong with a lot of heavy rain and gusty winds. And so anyway, I feel it's a little bit easier to digest to just basically say, hey, there's some rain there. That rain's heading our way, than me telling you all the dynamics and meteorology, why the rain's there and all that stuff's heading our way. So I think that's really important in science. And you see this a lot, whatever you're communicating is jargon and different things like that. So if you can remove scientific terms and think of different, more easier to digest ways to say it, your message will be a lot better received. So there you go. I've unweathered the weather. I will mention cold fronts on TV. That's the one that I have no problem mentioning. I feel everyone understands a cold front and I can use it to explain stuff. I want to pivot a little bit and just kind of wrap up some of the climate change stuff and get into some more sustainability topics away from that. Before we do that, I want to tell you a quick little story. It's kind of interesting. On television, I would have never talked about climate change for so many years in the last decade. Because it's polarizing, you got to stay away from politics and stuff. I've never been told not to talk about it. I just wouldn't touch it. However, and I can't tell you why, because I really don't know, about a year or two ago, I don't know, I have no problem talking about it anymore. And I feel that's also the sense with the meteorological community. We're seeing a lot more meteorologists talk about climate change in the weather forecast. I'm not sure what changed a couple years ago, but something at some point changed that more of us feel comfortable going on TV and saying it. I would say this, at this point, the science is so definitive and clear and been forced down people's throats of what's happening. So the facts, there's no really disputing the facts at this point. Folks that would be on the other side of this sort of polarizing sort of thing, and again, we're just talking about facts. Facts are, as they are, facts, but some folks like to make facts not facts. Folks on the other side at first tried to cast doubt that the Earth's warming. And that was kind of, I would say, late in the first decade of this century, and then even into early last of the tens. Then they pivoted from that and like, all right, well, the science is clear, the Earth's rapidly warming. So now it's to create doubt on how much is the Earth warming? That's kind of the question now. How much is it? That's kind of the doubt at this point. So I'll show you this quick little thing I did on the news. And I want to point out something that I shared in it because I feel it's really effective when you're communicating with someone that may not necessarily be buying what you're selling. In other words, feeling whatever you're sharing in your presentation. So there's some strategies for how to work around that. So for this one, I'm actually going to turn it over to me.
That 2020 tied for the hottest year on record. Records going back 200 years. And take a look at this. So over the 200-year period, the 10 hottest years on record were since 2000. So we've been in quite a warming trend. Locally, 2020 turned out to be the second warmest year on record for the Lehigh Valley. In Redding and in the Poconos, it was the 5th warmest year on record. So that hot weather continues. In fact, take a look at this right here. This is looking at the Earth's average temperatures. That's this black line right there. And it's natural for the Earth to go through warming periods and also through cooler periods. But here's what alarms scientists, and why you hear so much about global warming, is just how quickly the Earth has been warming since the 1980s. There's the 1980 mark right there. Look at that. That is a sharp rise in temperatures. So on Thursday, NASA released that.
Enough of that guy. So, one of the things that was so important is when you you want to localize this information, especially with climate change, because, around here, we really don't have a feel for it. But, folks are going to remember it was hot. So where are we at here? Is this, I can't tell the city where that one was. I forgot what I said. Let's say it's Allentown. So Lehigh Valley had its second warmest year on record last year, like the warmest it's ever been, going back, I think like 180 years. Record for the Lehigh Valley. It was pretty much up there for Redding and Poconos as
it was
well.
The
so it was
warmest year.
That I noted that little stat in there to kind of give you that local connection to material that you don't really feel a connection to. And I feel, in my opinion, that's one of the main reasons there's not been a whole lot of attraction on the warming of the planet and doing things about that, is because you don't have that local connection to it, or you're not seeing it in your backyard. Something, though, I want to do when I did this, and I normally would actually never show a graph on TV.
This black line right there.
I don't know. I did it because I wanted to show that curve, but normally I would always try to shy away from like sciencey looking stuff like charts and all that sort of stuff. But what I made sure to point out is I said, hey, it's natural for the Earth to go through cooling trends and warming trends. Because it's funny, I get this question a lot as someone who's on TV does the weather. Folks will come up to me and they'll say, I can always tell what their thoughts are when they say, what do you think about global warming? When someone asks me that communicates to me that they're not buying the idea of that. So I know that as soon as I hear that sort of question when someone asks me about that. So one of the first things I want to note is I want to see their side. I want to speak to their side. I don't want to just kind of speak at them and say, yeah, here's the science. How could you not believe blah, blah, blah. You want to try to reach your hand across the aisle. So the first thing I'm going to say, hey, listen, it's natural for the Earth to warm. It's been happening from day one, which is a fact. And we do go through warming trends and cooling trends. And so I'll say that, so, no big deal, that happens. And then I'll actually swing back and talk about the science, why it's important. I'll say, hey, the issue is how quickly we've been warming just over the last, I'm terrible at mental math, let's say 40 years. So to me, that's one of the most effective things. And I surprisingly actually had to do this one time. I didn't realize at the time. I was on some radio show. I forget who set it up. And unbeknownst to me, it was going to be an hour of the other person not buying anything about climate change or anything like that, which is cool. I don't care. I can hear anyone's views, just listen. And it was very clear the slant of this person who was doing the radio show. I think it was out in Nebraska. And what was interesting was I thought, okay, well, this is a great opportunity to keep sliding in accurate science in a stealth mode as often as I can. So I wanted to make sure that I kind of gave him a little echo chamber, so kind of echoed the sort of things he was saying. Now, I didn't say anything inaccurate, but I wanted to speak to some different things. So for example, he hates wind turbines. I actually like to look at them. I think they're nice. He put one on his house and had a bad experience one time. So he hates them. So they don't work, just in his mind. That's that simple. So right away, since I could tell he hated wind turbines, here's what I did to kind of see his side and bring it up. I said, hey, listen to this. Those wind turbines, they shut off when it gets windy. When winds get around 50, 55 miles an hour, they stop working. They shut off. I said, you know what, think about that. You have these out there to make energy from the wind, and they actually shut off on that. Now, I don't think in that particular instance, I explained that the reason they shut off is if they go too fast, it'll break the turbines that are creating electricity at the top of it here. But I wanted to kind of give this guy some views of his side, but I was still giving accurate science. There's nothing inaccurate with what I said, that they shut off at 55 miles an hour. But that helps him think that I'm buying what he's selling. And then I try to keep putting in the accurate science. I'm talking about the same kind of strategy I did with that little clip we saw, but more importantly, then I really pepped up the strat that, why scientists are so alarmed is how quickly it's warming and how quickly carbon dioxide stuff's going up. And I don't even think he caught it, that I got a lot of important climate science stuff in there in a way that just he was almost buying what I was selling to a degree. So that's the sort of thing. I mean, you want to make sure you're giving accurate facts, but I think it's important to use the facts to your advantage, like I did with that wind turbine. If he was throwing shade on him, I did that. What I did to bring it back around to show the good after I was throwing shades, and listen, they turn off when it gets too windy, is I brought up the fact that renewables, like this wind turbine, there are more jobs there. Job means money. So compared to fossil fuels for electricity, there are about three times more jobs in the renewable field than it is in fossil fuels. So I use that as an opportunity to bring that up, to put that out there, because I feel a lot of people like hearing that things create jobs and that's money. So I think it's it's really important to that's going back to know your audience. Something else I'd like to share is, hey, bring your life to the table in a presentation or anything you're doing. I love this speaker. He's from the University of Virginia. I've seen him a couple times. I love watching his webinars. His name's Brian Richter. He does a killer presentation about some of the water issues we're having around the country. And one of the first things he does is he talks about a road trip he did with his wife. And he brings some pictures from his road trip. And that's right at the top of his talk. And that's engaging. It's catching my attention. More importantly, it's giving me a connection, a kind of a human connection to what he's going to talk about and get into more of the science. And his talks are very effective for him communicating his message, because he's bringing his life to the table in the presentation. And he's actually bringing real life pictures from me he could talk about. And it's interesting, if I weren't kind of walking through today some of the nuts and bolts of some communication strategies, here's how I actually would have started the presentation. Let's say I was talking about sustainability and climate change. I would have talked about, hey, I was just out in Costa Rica and I saw this really cool leaf. And turns out those aren't from bugs right there. These holes in these leaves are actually natural. That's because in the jungle, it is dense, so there's not a whole lot of sunlight going through. So these plants have evolved that they get holes in them, so that way sunlight can get through those holes to the plants below, and the plant can keep growing. And I thought that was the most interesting thing. And I would use that as my springboard to get into talking about some sustainability things I saw in Costa Rica. I love this. Any guesses on what that is? Let's get you a closer view right there. So this is in a restaurant. I'm sitting there, I'm eating dinner, and I'm looking up, yes, at the Geico crawling around on the roof. But he didn't try to save me he tried to save me any money on the car insurance. But There's an LED light in there, so LEDs aren't warm. I mean, they can get a touch warm, but unlike a regular bulb where your hand, you jump right out, just like the frog jumping out of the water, put your hand on a regular bulb, you're gonna do that after a minute. You can actually put your hand on an LED. They don't get that warm because they're more efficient. They're not giving off all this energy, which is a waste, which is the issue with those incandescent light bulbs. So the old school ones. So they have a 2-liter soda bottle around that, which I love. There's such an issue with plastics around the world. If you travel to less developed countries that have beaches, you're gonna see so much just trash, plastic bags and plastic bottles. So I love going places and seeing things like that. We are upcycling. We are turning something that's junk into something new. Look how they made these water bottles into a little container for plants. This is in Cambodia over in Asia. So we went from Central America to Asia. Let's take you back to Central America now. I saw this all over Costa Rica. Everyone, because I guess reception is not good with all the mountains around Costa Rica, had satellite dishes for their TV. And you know what I kept seeing everywhere? Advertising on old satellite dishes. And I thought that is a cool idea. Instead of throwing them away, they're repurposing. So it's so cool to see these countries upcycling. And so anyway, so that's what I would do if I was getting into a presentation on sustainability, upcycling, and things like that. That's exactly how I would have started the presentation. Kind of get you in with some stuff, interesting fact about my trip, and then I get right into the material I wanted to talk about. And going back to kind of your connections, I love this. One of our star professors here, Cheryl Wanko, who's an English professor, she made Christmas gifts for everyone. It took a long time. She grew loofahs, so she grew sponges. I think it takes a year to grow that. Once that grows that, you peel off the skin and you got yourself a sponge. And she put a little bow around and gave them out for Christmas. And I just love when you can not only bring your connection to presentation, but you can physically bring something you did. I just think that adds to that if I were talking about sustainability tips. So the last thing I want to kind of point out there is just how words matter. And I think this is really interesting. Certain keywords matter big time. So what I'm going to do is, I don't remember what the context of this was. I'm going to assume the border issues, but NBC National News did a really interesting little count of how many times the previous presidential administration used the term crisis. So just for a second, for a minute, let's listen.
Explain to the American people that we have a humanitarian and security crisis at our southern border. Solve this crisis at our southern border. It is a real crisis. To end this crisis at our border, stem the humanitarian and security crisis. The president will speak about this crisis to address what is a genuine humanitarian and security crisis by addressing.
Well, you get the idea. That goes on for a minute. Trump comes in and says that. So they were told and coached to keep using the word crisis. Keep pushing that. This is all the same interview, crisis. And I'll tell you why. There's a connotation of that word that makes you feel something. When you say the word crisis, it should make you a little anxious. It should make you just physically, when you hear the word crisis, not feel great. So by using that word with whatever you're talking about, it kind of adds some initiative to it and some urgency to it because you're adding that emotion to that talking point, to whatever the topic is. So that's a strategy. And what's interesting is how that's kind of evolved over the years. So what I want to look at is, I like to say global warming because I'll tell you why in just a second, but a lot of folks say climate change, and now there's also climate crisis. In fact, here's Al Gore's book. It says, An Inconvenient Truth, this is an update, the crisis of global warming. It was of no coincidence he used the word crisis, and of no coincidence he used the phrase global warming. So let's break this down. Late 90s into early 2000s, global warming is what everyone in the media said, is what we all said to refer to the warming planet, which is what's going on. Then, this is what I hear. I didn't do the full research on this, but I'm pretty sure this is an accurate story. During the Bush administration, what happened is some sort of PR person, they did a little research and they found out the global warming that made people want to act, especially when the movie Inconvenient Truth came out. That really called people to action. That movie was very successful. People wanted to do stuff. It seemed right actually after that movie, all of a sudden there was a pivot in media and they started saying climate change. And that kind of really took off. And that's pretty much the vernacular these days. That's what we say is climate change. And I like the sound of that because you know why? Change is good. In a couple minutes here, I'm going to walk out. I'm going to go over to the library and then go to class. I'm not kind of changing it. I'm not going to sit in this room the rest of the day. It's a little too warm. So change is a good thing. So when I hear climate change, it says, oh, that's a good thing. I like change. Change makes me feel good. Warming, I don't like the heat. So warming makes me feel bad. So global warming, that's bad. Climate change, that sounds good to me. So this PR folks, since we're going to Google and see how this happened from the Bush administration or some entity related to that in some capacity. I would imagine it actually wasn't the administration. I just know it happened during the time. There's a lot more online research. But folks like Al Gore and Michael Mann, they've all changed the branding. They will not say climate change. They always say climate crisis. Kind of like we just saw with the previous administration to put that urgency back in there. That's kind of them taking back what some of the PR folks did to try to swing people to say climate crisis. I don't buy into those little one-word things, so I like to just keep it straight and right the facts. So global warming, that's it. The Earth is warming and it's rapidly warming. So that's personally what I use when I'm talking in a science capacity. If I'm talking in a regular person capacity, of course I'm going to say climate change because I like the way it sounds. So it's interesting how one little word can make a big difference. So there you go, some little tips if you're communicating science, different sustainability things. We'll just walk right through this in the last minute we got right here. Anytime you can, get right into it. Don't say a whole lot of thank yous or announcements. To get right into what you want to talk about. Lead with something that's going to get your audience to kind of get your attention, and you can get right into your material. Any strengths you have as a presenter, you absolutely have at least one. Make sure you do more of that. Definitely need to know your audience. Where are they at? How are they going to receive the message? What can you say so your message will be more received by that type of audience that's listening? Analogies are the most important thing we got in science to help communicate it to folks that don't have a great literacy for science, really understand science well. Get rid of those technical terms when you're communicating science to that sort of audience, like my mom who slept during science class. And then if you can, relate to the views of people who may not believe what you believe. No big deal. I mean, who cares what someone else believes? But if you can kind of show that you're on their level and kind of on their side a little bit, you can maybe help bring that person to the facts that you're communicating. Because at the end of the day, we're not here to change anyone's views. We're here as scientists to just communicate facts. I don't care what you believe in when it comes to global warming, climate change, climate crisis. I don't care. Here's what I want to do. I want to give you accurate facts. That's my job as a scientist. Facts, that's it. And then, bring your own connections. You've got some stories to tell, your own life, and you bring that into whatever material you're presenting. Something I want to point out, I bet you guys are still remembering the soda bottle that was a lampshade. And also maybe they were holding plants in the satellite dishes. Upcycling is memorable. When you can do that sort of stuff, or maybe even in your own life and share that with someone or put it in your yard, that is something that's memorable when it comes to sustainability because it's so unique. It makes you think of, I haven't seen like that before, but that's a good idea. So that's something that's so important when you're communicating sustainability. If you can, show some cool examples of how you repurpose something new. And yeah, we talked about crisis and stuff. Certain words matter. They give you emotions to that audience. So there's some communication thoughts and ideas I got for you. And I appreciate everyone's time. I hope the audio and all that stuff, we did the best we could, but I appreciate that. Which you're my FYE?
No, I'm not.
Oh, you're not? Oh, I was going to give you extra credit on this assignment. I appreciate you coming. Maybe I'll talk to you. We'll talk after class. Maybe I'll email you one of your teachers. Well, thank you for coming. And thanks for everyone who attended online. I'm just curious. Everyone bolts. All right, 5 people. I like that. Thanks everyone for spending your lunchtime with me. And next Wednesday, don't forget, this seminar is not in this room. We are down at the Gordon Natural area for a tour, weather permitting, of course. Weather permitting of some of the cool things you can see right now, and I'm sure some of the flood damage and things like that. So there's going to be down there leading us on a great tour next week. So I hope you guys can come down and get your steps in down in the Gordon Natural area. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Drew.
Oh, thanks. Thanks, kind.
Drew, it's 12:52, and technically that's the end of the class session. So if anyone has to go, please do. Do you have time for a couple of questions?
I do, absolutely. I do have to run in like 3 minutes, but I'd love to talk.
Does anyone have a quick question? Throw out.
Can you take questions from the virtual audience?
Absolutely. If anyone's around, if anyone's alive out and over the airwaves online, absolutely. I'd love to talk to anyone.
I don't see any coming up in the chat. I did have one reaction, and being part of a university community, science is important. And so I was fascinated to see that some of your suggestions, I bristled a little bit, to take the technical terms out.
I know.
But I think still the combination of thinking about our own strengths, about leading with something that's really exciting, about connecting our presentation to our own experiences, I think all that's really important advice. And the scientist in me still wants to maintain some of that emphasis on science.
I will admit, when you, for lack of a better phrase, when you dumb down science, you can get it, but it's not as accurate as it was when you just say it straight as. And I'm with you absolutely on just saying the actual information. But I can just tell you from my perspective and how I've had to communicate science over the years. I know from the audience that's receiving it, when I drop science terms, it's almost like a roadblock on message. Like if I actually want to talk to you right now, let's put someone who's tall right in between you and me. And that person who's tall is a technical term. And I just learned over the years from my professional experience that take them out, my messages will be received better. I don't disagree with you. As a science guy, I want to be all technical. Like, if you're up to me, why it is to me. But for the greater good, I love to actually talk about low pressure and how it causes cold front. There was a little bit of a triple point right there. And the warmth, I'd love to get into that. But, you got to go know your audience. But I think what you said was best at the end of the day was bring yourself to any presentation or anything you're communicating, no matter what the form is. Even if it's like a technical scientific paper, if there's some way to kind of put in a little bit of a connection there of something interesting that was part of your results, I think it lands well with the audience. Yeah.
Accurate information, non-technical people are less likely to misunderstand and ultimately get the science right.
Oh, no question. I can tell you that firsthand. Yeah. No, when you remove some technical terms and you're not making the science inaccurate, here's what you're doing at the end of the day. It's like a sticky note. You're going to have that stick with someone. If you drop a lot of science who's not someone who's science literate, it's going to go in one ear and out the other. If you present me like doing my little stupid stuff with, sorry for the web audience, but it's true. A little stupid stuff with the sand. I had campfire ash and sand. At the end of the day, it was to be memorable, and that science would stick with the audience. Now I know it was silly, and I would present it like I was the clown when I was doing it. But something like that is like a sticky note, and to me that helps that person retain that message or that science you shared with them.
All right, thank you.
Oh, thanks, guys.
Yeah, really appreciate your making time.
Drew, I'll hand this back to you.
All right, I'm gonna say,
Do you have any science classes?
No, I don't. I'm actually a